This was a great improvement over last week. The water. You have had to enter. Even has ice. Rob can have the last half of the class next week. We started a new tradition. Like I said, you've had to enter. Just before sitting down for Sunday dinner with the family, a certain mother told her 2 children to please go wash your hands before you eat. Startled by her son, he said, Jesus says it's okay not to wash our hands before we eat. Where did you get that idea? The mother replied. Well, the boy continued, the Pharisees were being tattletales on the disciples, and they told Jesus that they didn't wash their hands before they ate, and he called them a bunch of hypocrites. And the mother went on, did Jesus tell his disciples they didn't have to wash their hands? I don't know, the boy replied, but he didn't make them either. And if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. Well, you and I know that Jesus was not advocating eating food with dirty hands in this story. It's not, in fact, about washing hands at all. It's not about anything outside or outside of the body. And apart from all the good reasons that we use hand sanitizers and tell our kids to wash their hands before they eat and when they come out of the bathroom, and also the recent Ebola scare of contamination, even if you touch the person who has that disease, and also the research that establishes the fact that washing hands can minimize significantly the contamination of certain illnesses and diseases by the fact that we would do that, and why we teach it to our children. But this is not a matter of just simply being germ-free. What started only as, in this story, what started only as a ceremony recorded in the Old Testament for the priests and the Levites. In other words, before they would use the utensils for food, they were to wash their hands, and they were to cleanse the utensils inside and out to somehow symbolize their role as servants of God, that this was a holy moment. Things that were to be done were to make us clean before God, just like sacrifices were. And so anything that they touched, anything that they used to have that picture, or to have that symbol, that this is a holy moment before God, a holy God with his sinful people, with a message that cleanses them and makes them whole, or makes them clean. Well, throughout the centuries, they thought it was good for the priests and Levites, it was good for everybody. And so it not only became just a suggestion, it became a requirement that anybody who would eat at any time or any place were to ceremonially wash their hands. It even just means sprinkle a little bit on it. That doesn't even mean get the dirt off them. But it's to somehow represent that they were being obedient and somehow honoring the holiness of God, before whom they lived and of whom they were children. A picture of the holiness of the person, the righteous person before God. It's a good picture. It's a nice picture. But it became no longer a picture. It became on a par with the commandments. The commandments that you were to do this and not do that. It required of the people. For example, if they didn't wash their hands, as the disciples were accused of not doing, which they didn't do, that's something like saying if you don't go to church, you're not a Christian. It's like saying if you don't pray before you eat, you're not a Christian. So there was taking something that very external It was a man-made idea for all the people, and then requiring it as if it was God required for their holiness and for the fact that it qualifies them before God. Now, this sets Jesus off on a long, passionate speech aimed mostly at the Pharisees, but then the crowd he turns to speak, and then the disciples at the end get in on the action as well. And he begins almost full throttle, something like, oh boy, did the prophet Isaiah ever have your number, you hypocrites. You people honor me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me. You worship me in vain. Your teachings are about rules taught by men. And then he goes from there to discussion of purity laws, the commandments, which include also responsibility to parents, goes to the anatomy of digestion. I hope you caught that there. If he is maybe even being sarcastic, like, how dull are you? And then gets down to the basics, the foibles and the mess of the human heart. He also throws in their face the example they used to excuse themselves from honoring their parents. They would use a certain excuse to not honor their parents, especially in that culture in old age where you were to take care of your parents. This is the primary way of honoring them, both physically and financially. And they said, oh, we can't do that with this because we already gave it to God. It's set aside. And so Jesus calls them on like using a tax shelter or something to get out of responsibility of one of the commandments that they were to carry out, which was to have priority in their lives. So they're using a man-made rule to somehow not express the true matter of the heart. Now what Jesus is going for is where your heart is. Where your heart is, there your treasure is. Where your treasure is, there your heart is. And he's calling to task not just some external practice and man-made tradition out there, which can be fine in themselves, because we all have traditions. And we all have things that we do that maybe go from generation to generation, or even within a church or a church denomination. But he calls it pure hypocrisy. You are a bunch of hypocrites. And the boy used that quote as if laying that before his mother, that she was maybe a hypocrite. A hypocrite is a word that comes from the stage, actors, because they pretend there's something they're not. Of course, maybe it's so hard to tell. In the earlier days of stage, you could tell because they would usually just wear a mask to make it look like a devil or a woman or a man or a child or some other kind of character. And that's kind of what he's accusing the Pharisees of doing, to take this thing of washing your hands before you eat. It's something they put on so that people could say, oh yeah, you are a loyal, faithful Jewish person. And that's what Jesus is taking to task, where then the matters of the heart become not inconsequential, but not as significant. It's not that the Pharisees were unethical. They were very good people. But when it came to their righteousness before God, they fell very, very short. Well, I think there was a time in the Christian Reformed Church and maybe in other denominations as well, where people start using you and your for God instead of thee and thou in prayer. We start questioning there. And then also when people, used to go to church twice on Sunday, and then they start going to once just on Sunday, and then they say, there's something about their Christian lifestyle here that's not in sync. That external thing, it almost became a requirement. I know that if you're going to be an elder or deacon in the church, when I was raised, you had to be a person that was in the pew both Sunday morning and Sunday night. It became a qualification. Now, there are a lot of other things, too, that are in our tradition that maybe function that way. And maybe now, these days, if you're in church only once a month, you're pretty good. But less than that, then we'll start questioning. Well, there are good things about going to church. That's why you go to pastor, and that's why I'm here today. Something very significant and very important about it. But somehow, things like that, the fact that we pray at mealtime, the fact that we go to church, the attire that we have for going to church, or whether we go to Sunnyslope or not, people notice those things. They say, oh, just wait a minute here, something's not quite right in their Christian life. Well, the chilling movie Godfather, which you probably have all seen at one time in your life, shows a Corleone family or attending a service of baptism and communion in the Catholic Church. It was very ornate, it was very liturgical, and it was as high church as you could get. While other members of the family were outside the church, gunning people down and strangling them to death, reveals the hypocrisy in an extreme sort of way of this so-called Christian family. And then when I read these verses in Matthew, especially the catalog of sins lurking in the human heart at the end of the chapter, I remember a title of a book that I had, or used to have, I think I gave it away. It was written by Keith Miller called The Habitation of Dragons. And he takes that frightening description to represent the untamed and personal dragons, destructive impulses that surface in our lives and are lying ready and lurking in our heart. Things like fears and resentment and guilt, impatience, prejudice, hate, lust, greed, gossip. And he asks, where do these come from? And where do these things live? What is their habitation? And habitation of dragons comes from the King James Version that is used in Isaiah 35, verse 7, where dragons, along with other painful, frightening places that threaten to undo people and the world, will someday submit to the radical change of renewal and reversal when the kingdom of God comes and be rendered harmless. So when Jesus entered our world to suffer, to die, and to rise again, it was not to get the externals right. And if the externals were there, that they, of course, would have meaningful expression. Nor did he come to determine the condition of the human heart, whether it was clean or not in terms of that, but rather to tame the wild stuff within us. You and I are not without help. You and I are not without hope. He came to give us new hearts. And this happens with an internal change, not by external rituals or practice per se, which represent perhaps a perfect life deep within us. Not all the rituals in the world, not all the fasting, not all the bowing down, not all the casting yourself down, not all the folding of your hands, not all the going to church, not all the giving, not all the singing of songs, can simply by themselves change your heart before God. They can be, however, used by the Holy Spirit to bring about that change, but by themselves, you can't just simply say, I'm in the church, therefore I'm good. You can't just simply say, I prayed today before I ate, maybe 3 times, after I ate 6 times, and therefore I'm good. Nor can other people say that about you. It looks good, it looks great, it looks fantastic, don't stop. But I think you're getting Jesus' point. There was a 5-year-old boy who once surprised his parents and friends by hitting a neighbor child in the head with a rock. And he explained it by saying, a voice just seemed to say to me, go ahead and throw it. Well, his father, needless to say, objected to the voice theory. But in a sense, isn't Jesus saying this? There's a voice. There's a voice of killing when you hear, I hate you. A voice of revenge. I'm going to get even with that person. A voice of lust. Satisfy me. A voice of jealousy. I'll do whatever I can to make you look bad. Or of gossip. I can't wait till I rip you apart, especially so that it makes me sound better and better than you are, because I don't do that. I'm not like that. Where do these voices come from? And corresponding actions. They come from our hearts. They come from deep within us. And notice that Jesus at this point is not quoting Genesis 3 verse 15 and verses in that chapter about the serpent and Satan bringing sin into the world. That, in a sense, is beside the point. Sin is in the world, and it resides deeply within people. And Jesus is not allowing us to say at this point that Satan is the cause of our wrongdoing, because that would be so easy to blame the diabolical enemy. If we're to do that, it would maybe divert attention to where the real problem was. And evil intentions not only dwell deep within the notorious criminals that we hear about from day to day in our society, but they also reside within us and within those who we know and love and trust. And I've looked at myself, and I've thought many times, they'll always want to use the devil as an excuse. If he didn't, if that weren't, whatever. But the matter of fact is, I don't need Satan to sin or to commit sin. There's enough evil within me that could give rise to sin multiple times every day for a lifetime and lifetimes over. The matter of fact is, it's the nature of the human heart. We have been brought up a tradition that the human heart is basically entirely unrighteous before God. And the Heidelberg Catechism puts it this way: I have a natural tendency, well, I hate this sentence, I have a natural tendency to hate God and to hate my neighbor. I have a natural tendency to hate God and to hate my neighbor. A pastor once tells a story about the most saintly woman that he had ever known. And she said, there isn't a sin of which I am not capable. I could be a prostitute, I could be a murderess, I could embezzle. And the pastor was convinced, of course, that she couldn't, and instead he thought she was displaying an amazing amount of humility, and therefore congratulated her on that. But she caught him up short. She says, you don't really believe I mean that. I do mean it, because I realize if there is a person who has committed a single sin that crops up in their life, in their form, also flows through me and expresses itself in other ways. Hate doesn't always have to be expressed in murder. It has other faces. It has other sounds. It has other expressions. That's kind of what she was saying. She then went on to say, until I believe that, I am a self-righteous, proud, arrogant woman. That should scare us just a little bit. It's something like saying, I would say to you, there's something wrong with you. And you come right back at me and say, there's something wrong with you too. That's kind of, we're all on the same page. These evils reside in our heart, and there's no difference then in any of us in that sense if we are all alike. The stuff in our heart is what makes us unclean before God. The stuff that comes out of our mouth, the stuff that comes out of our expressions that he's talking about. Talking about what makes you unclean or makes you clean. It's not the external things that, as great and wonderful they are and important and significant and you would be encouraged to express in you. There's nothing wrong with brushing your hands and your plates before you eat. This is kind of good. Let's have a little symbol of cleanness here, or holiness. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe that's why we bow and pray before we eat, just so that before God we recognize there's a holy presence here. You can express that in many, many different ways without being self-righteous and hypocritical. Like Pharisees were being accused of by Jesus. Now, when it comes to our faith, are our hearts in it, or is it just merely an expression on the outside? Are we really longing for God's grace to work deep within us as He promised it can? Or are we so easily succumbing to the cover-ups, the things that make us look good and appear good when it comes before God's grace, or when it comes before our righteousness, or on the other hand, when it comes before the condition of our heart? How do we handle it? I don't know. I like the externals as working for me to make me look good. You know, when you go to church, it used to be more the case than it is now. Before you left, you know, I would just kind of put up a tie like this, make sure it was straight, and everything was good. And you know what the result of that was? It made me feel clean. It made me feel good. It almost made me feel holy. And there's other ways we can do that as well as we parade around through life. And especially when you go to church, because you want people to see you as clean and holy and righteous and that sort of thing. So the temptation is real easy. It's not difficult at all. I think we can all relate to that. I think we can all understand. Now, we who marvel, though, at the wonderful grace of Jesus, the amazing grace of God that saves wretches like we are, and we sing about so frequently, but in the same breath, this is perhaps the other side of it, in the same breath, when it comes to the sins of others, we scowl and we scorn at them, and we become stern. You know, what accounts for that? Why can we be so different? We should be amazed at that grace that saved us, but then when we talk about the sins of others, we talk to them as if they could never be saved, or their sins could never be forgiven. And if we believe in the gospel that says we also believe in a God who gives us offer salvation and grace to all, forgiveness and righteousness, this way is the way we can give more than just lip service to God, an external picture of what He has accomplished for us in Jesus Christ. Teaching our children sometimes can be very difficult because we say we live this way. We do this because this is how Christians live. This is how Christians act. And so we do that kind of thing. So we show them the external things because this is appropriate for a Christian. It's Christ-like. But on the other hand, I trust in the hope that the parents that these children have a character, a person about them, a heart within them that reflects and exudes Christ-likeness, that they are servants of Jesus Christ. They are caught up in God's grace that has worked in their hearts and their lives by His Spirit to make them the kind of people they are, rather than just people say, this is good, this is right, this is wrong, and that sort of thing. So we could probably say that worship here this morning is more than just the externals than the liturgy. By the way, if I really wanted to correct things and make this liturgy correct, I would have did those things I forgot the ones, and also what I did last week, I do it again. It's because we did it wrong. Something was not quite right. I think we all sense together that our coming and our being here together is about our relationship to God through Jesus Christ, and that the affections of our hearts before God and before others is not just about the pictures and the symbols and the practices that we have. It's about the matter of a heart that's been transformed by the Spirit of God. You know, you've probably heard it said that when you talk about the ritual of church attendance as being sufficient to notice as our claim to be righteous before God, or one of His faithful followers. And maybe if we just do that, we maybe don't even expect our hearts to change. We did the external thing. We showed up, and there's a record. They were there twice every Sunday, for who knows how many years. Wow. It is impressive. Someone once said that going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than standing in a garage can make you a car. that's really silly. Of course, nothing can make you into a car. But when the work of God's Spirit works in our hearts and in our lives with His grace and His love, there is the fruit of the Spirit that corresponds to the external activity. Corresponds to the holiness. Corresponds to that loyalty and that faithfulness and to that even repetitiveness, the kinds of things that we do. And then one day, in that passage where the dragons are habitating, Isaiah 35 says, all things will become beautiful. The desert places will become places of living water. The eyes of the blind will be opened to see. The lame will prance around like the deer. The tongues of the mute will sing for joy. Fears of death will become unplugged, and burning sands of the desert will become a cool place of refreshing water. And the habitation of fierce dragons will become a safe place. That's the work that God is doing and will completely do at one time. That's the direction He is going in His plan for salvation and for the coming of His kingdom. The question is that the direction your heart is going? Let us pray. God, we really thank You that life is a matter of the heart, because it gives us the assurance that the problem with our lives is not whether our tie is straight or our shoes are tied or we're wearing the proper clothing. It assures us that our real problem behind all the things that are wrong in this world and ourselves are the hearts of people, including our own. And we're then so thankful that's where You do Your work. That's where You do Your best work. That's where You do Your purging. That's where You do your cleansing. That's where You do your renewal as we experience the work of Your Holy Spirit. Help us realize, Lord, in the midst of all we do and say to make it look like we are Your people, may we really believe and hope that what is really supposed to happen is happening in our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.